Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on the latest episode. We are talking about Radiohead. We talk about basically their entire career, how we became fans, and maybe even when we kind of punched out a little bit. So, hope you enjoy the episode. Please like, subscribe, share it with a friend. Help us out. Hi, everybody. It's the Album of Record podcast. I'm Craig Lindell, joined as always by Andrew Schnittke. How is it going, Andrew?
Going pretty good, Craig. I will stay true to my word and follow up with another entry from the new metal poetry book to get us kicked off here today. I don't know. I'm not as satisfied with this one as last week's entries, but we've got here we go. I feel so alive for the very first time, and I think I can fly. You got it?
Yeah, exactly. It's a band I've seen before. POD.
You've seen POD. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Very good. Very good.
I don't remember where. It was part of a much larger bill, but I know I saw that band. Inexplicably, weird times in music. POD, I grouped them up with Papa Roach and Alien Ant Farm.
Sure.
Because they were all over the radio during those times, and just for whatever reason, in hindsight, they're not like my favorite bands, and I don't look fondly on those times. But in the moment, it's like you check out the things that are going on, and you do the best you can.
I didn't really dislike POD per se. But I will say, like, the album that song "Alive" is from, was it like Satellite maybe or something like that? Not as good as the one before that, which I don't. Was it maybe even called Sellout? Or that couldn't have been Sellout. I can't remember what the name of it was.
I can't remember either.
But it doesn't, and it really doesn't matter. But it was a better album, and it had a really, really, really good song on it that I also can't remember the title of. So I guess we'll just
so
have
2001 was Satellite.
Yeah, they had one before that, but I don't know. Neither here nor there.
Fundamental
Southtown.
Elements of Southtown.
Yeah, I think that was the song, was Southtown. That was actually pretty good. But so I don't want to drag this bit out too long, so I'm going to read another one so we can get through these. But this one I like a little bit more. What is it really that's in your head? What little life that you had just died? I'm going to be the one that's taking over. Now this is what it's like when worlds collide.
I
love how many of these like I don't have.
Worlds collide,
and then you get to the end. Go. Yeah. I can't not
Power
remember
Man 5000.
That's it. And
yes.
The one thing that's interesting about Power Man 5000 is that somebody in that band is related to Rob Zombie. I'm pretty sure like his brother is in that band in some capacity. Maybe I think so even too. The singer. But
so there was that one, and then there was it? No, not Saliva. There was the band that was related to Jonathan from Korn.
There's
his cousin.
Was that nepotism? Was that Orgy?
Maybe. Yes, that sounds right.
I think maybe it was
Orgy. Somebody out there is going, no, it wasn't Orgy, stupid. It was blah, blah, blah.
For sure. I was just trying to think of the like Family Values bands that would have like been all in that orbit. So.
Oh, man. Yeah. So we are not going to talk about nu metal, rap rock, or any of those things today. This is going to be kind of our Radiohead episode. I don't think we even have much of a structure as to how we're going to talk about the band, but it's certainly one that you and I have been big fans of. I feel like I have an interesting relationship with this band where it's on and off, on and off. There were times where I completely punched out with this band. And it's funny when you and I talk to younger fans, they'll say things like "In Rainbows" is easily the greatest Radiohead record of all time, and I'm just like, not at my age, man, not at my age. But it's cool. Like I'm not judgy about it. I just do not for me, not for my money.
So I saw them on the In Rainbows tour. Pretty sure it was In Rainbows tour. And it was interesting. I know it was after In Rainbows because they played a lot of In Rainbows songs. I saw them up in Cleveland at is it Blossom? Is that the amphitheater?
Yep.
Saw them there, and it was really shocking how young the audience was. Like, I expected an older crowd, and it was actually a younger crowd, and they were way more excited for anything off of Hail to the Thief and In Rainbows than they were for songs off of OK Computer, and especially like the Bends. The Bends, that was like bathroom break time for the younger people around us, which is really surprising. And I think it's an interesting aspect to this band because there's not a lot of bands that are like that. You know, like Metallica kind of comes to mind. You know, a band who sort of has different eras of fans. But it was. I just remember being surprised, like as they were playing the In Rainbows songs, which to me are fine. I enjoy In Rainbows, but it's not what I like about Radiohead. And so it was fascinating to see how into it the crowd was. And I realized, like, oh, I'm here for a different reason than these other people are here around us. So
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels like we're starting this conversation backwards, but you know, Hail to the Thief was probably the last record that I bought on opening day for Radiohead. It was probably, and I liked it. I didn't love Hail to the Thief.
agreed.
To me, it felt like a bit of a letdown compared to what came before it. Like I wasn't mad about it, and but I was less intrigued about how they were going to follow it up. You know, for me in Radiohead, it's very similar to maybe the Avocado record by Pearl Jam, where it was like, warning signs ahead. Not a bad record, but warning signs ahead.
I think, you know, we'll talk about all these albums, but this is a purely subjective viewpoint. But for me, you know, Radiohead was on such a clear upward trajectory through Pablo Honey to the Bends, OK Computer, and then Kid A. And then like Amnesiac was like an extension of Kid A. It wasn't a proper follow-up, but so to me it still counts sort of as that, but maybe that was like the rounding of the peak for me. And while I did like Hail to the Thief, for me it was the first time it wasn't a clear leap forward for the band. It was like, oh, we might just be here for a while with this band. Whereas like you know, when I'm talking about trajectory too, I don't just mean I liked them better. I mean trajectory in terms of they were reinventing themselves over all of these albums. These albums were all like clear leaps forward for them. And Hail to the Thief was the first time that didn't really do that. It you know, it doesn't sound like Kid A or Amnesiac, but it's the sound of it is not like a new direction for Radiohead. It's sort of the beginning of what I now feel is where Radiohead have been since then, has been adjacent to that Hail to the Thief. That sort of introduced us to like, okay, this is where we kind of settled and this is who we are now, which is fine.
Yeah.
Like they put out some really good albums, but it's just they're not reinventing themselves the way they did prior to that.
So, what was your relationship to Pablo Honey like when that one came out? Were you on that one? First of all, nobody was on that one right away.
Right.
That in those days, you had to wait to be exposed to something either by radio or MTV. That record came out in February of '93, but actually, Creep was released in September of '92.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it was 120 minutes seeing waiting for the Creep video on the weekends after what would have been my bedtime if it had been a school night.
So at that point, we didn't even have cable TV where I grew up. So I didn't have MTV. So for me, Creep was a song that I definitely had heard on the radio before, but it was not a big radio hit, at least not where I grew up. Like on the radio stations we had, it was not something that was played a lot. And at that time, 92, 93, we were so in the middle of the explosion of Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, that's what I was so focused on. So I would say Radiohead was not on my radar at all with when Pablo Honey was originally out. I've since gone back to it, of course, and it's fine. It's a perfectly acceptable debut album, but there's nothing in Pablo Honey that tells me like, oh, hey, this is going to be one of the defining rock bands of an entire generation. Like, I think that's something that's particularly interesting about Radiohead is that they put out this album that has no hints of what they were going to become. But yeah, but in terms of just Pablo Honey itself, it was not even on my radar. It wasn't a factor. When the Bends came out, it wasn't like, oh, I remember these guys. I had no preconceived notion of really what Radiohead was.
So I was one of those people who bought it. I probably bought it at Great Lakes Mall at some mall record store, paid $14, and I was disappointed. For me, it was kind of a 2-song record. I listened to it a lot because I owned it. But yeah, for me, it was Creep, and it was probably Stop Whispering, were probably my 2 favorites. I probably liked a couple other songs as well, and I was really working to talk myself into it. But no, I kind of figured that this was a one and done kind of a band for me. If there's no way I was going, I'm the biggest Radiohead fan in the world. Not the case. So yeah, I was early, but I was certainly not. I think other people were like, "Oh, cool, Craig bought that record, so I can tape Creep off of it, and then I don't have to buy it." Because that's a lot of what we did in those days.
Anyone Can Play Guitar was another standout one for me from that one. But I do agree that even now, like the outside of those 3 songs, Creep, Stop Whispering, Anyone Can Play Guitar, the rest of it is pretty interchangeable for me. And I would say you're spot on that had I listened to it at that time, I do think I would have viewed this as a one-hit wonder band. Like, okay, this is another band. Like, they have this really cool song, Creep, but nothing else is really like that on this album. This might be really about what they can do. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying. There's just nothing in here really that hints too much at what they were about to do with the next 3 albums that they put out.
So then, obviously, a couple years go by. It's 1995. You and I are 16 years old now. The amount of difference. I've tried to explain this in my writing on the Album of Record website back when it was an essay site, but trying to remember for myself and trying to explain, the youthfulness of being 12 or 13, and then all of a sudden waiting 3 years and the second record from a band that you listened to for the first time at 12 or 13, and now you're 16. It's most notable with a band like Tool, where I was very young when Rage and Tool released Undertow and whatever, the eponymous Rage record. And then by the time Evil Empire and Anima come out, I am a different human being. And I feel the same way about the Bends.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said. I do think, like, when you turn 16 and get your driver's license, that autonomy you gain in life changes your perspective on a lot of things in life. And I do think that can bleed into how you appreciate a lot of things in life, be it movies, TV, certainly music, school, like all these things that feel different when you sort of gain that autonomy to be independent. And so I do think, the way we received these albums probably is somewhat dictated by that. Like, who knows? Had we been 16 when Pablo Honey comes out and we were listening to it in our car and driving around and attaching memories to that, maybe we would look back and feel differently about Pablo Honey. You know, we can't change the circumstances of when we hear these albums, but definitely independent of that, though, I mean, it's pretty much universally agreed upon that the Bends was a radical leap forward for this band. And this is like the first introduction to Radiohead is, hey, this might be the greatest rock band on the planet.
So what was the first thing? Do you remember what the first thing was that grabbed you about the Bends? Because for me, it was again, I'm back to MTV. It was the video for Fake Plastic Trees. I had heard some of the other stuff, and I liked High and Dry, but High and Dry didn't cause me to go out and buy the record, I don't believe. But I think by the time Fake Plastic Trees came out and that video, there was just such a vibe in that video, and that song was so sullen and in a ballad, and the way it comes up at the end, just so powerful, that I think that was my memory might be failing me, but I think that was the song in the moment that brought me in, that really gave the Bends where I had to buy it.
I always get mixed up between the videos for Fake Plastic Trees and Karma Police. Is Fake Plastic Trees the one where the guy's running in front of the car? Or is that Karma Police? That's got to be Karma Police, right? Because the one where the guy's running in front of the car and then he like turns around and he like has a lighter and he lights it, but there was like a gas leak in the car, and so suddenly the fire is then chasing the car as it goes backwards. That has to be Karma Police.
Yeah, Tom York being pushed around in a shopping cart is Fake Plastic Trees.
That's right. Yep.
And he looks impossibly skinny and impossibly young. It's unbelievable. Now that we know Tom York and we've grown up with Tom York, how childlike he looked in the early part of the career is just unbelievable.
There's a Radiohead DVD called 7 Television Commercials, which is phenomenal. It's like their peak 7 music videos that I think are all iconic and just incredible. We'll see if I can remember these off the top of my head. It was Fake Plastic Trees, Street Spirit, Just, No Surprises, Paranoid Android, Karma Police. Oh, I don't remember what the 7th one was now.
All right, let's do it again. I've got it in front of me. So you said...
Okay. So it was definitely Fake Plastic Trees, Street Spirit, and Just are the 3 I remember from the Bends. And then off OK Computer, we had No Surprises, Karma Police, Paranoid Android, and it's the 4th one that I'm drawing a blank on.
The last one that you're missing is from the Bends.
Oh, it is from the Bends. My Iron Lung?
High and Dry.
High and Dry, okay. Yeah. I don't really remember that video that well, so that's probably why I don't.
It was a big song.
But oh yeah, for sure. I just can't remember off the top of my head what the video was. But anyways, I sort of digressed this onto a different path. But
no, it's all good.
The thing that I remember first about the Bends was actually the Street Spirit video. And I remember not being like totally sold on that song when I first heard it. And because at that time I was still very much I listen to alternative rock, like I want aggressive, heavy alternative rock, and this song didn't rock, so I
was also into like Counting Crows and Tori Amos, so I loved that song. I felt like just in terms of you and I talk about this all the time, but in terms of ending a record, you can't do much better than Street Spirit,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I absolutely love the song now, but I just remember at the time not being sold on the song, but I remember just being mesmerized by that video. So the video, which was recorded at a super high frame rate, and then it's like all slowed down, but it's like really like smooth and like it's just very well done, very cool video. And I just remember like thinking like, hey, like what's these guys' story? You know, there's something interesting here. And then it was for me, so because we had at that time.
Well, before you leave Street Spirit, I want to tell this story because
Okay.
you and I talked about this recently. One of my best friends is an incredible pianist, and he's just genetically, he's just a phenomenal musician. Some people are born with it, right? And so he's got a son who's like 15 or 16 now and has perfect pitch, perfect ear. And so he was playing Street Spirit on the piano, I think. And his son was sitting across the room and was like, yeah, man, it doesn't sound right. It sounds like it's out of key. And so he went to the computer and he played it, and he figured out that in the studio when Radiohead was done recording that song, or actually he was playing it on guitar. Anyway, playing it on guitar. But when Radiohead was done with that song, they adjusted the speed slightly to make it a little bit more sullen or give it a slightly different vibe. And so instead of being on an actual note, you can only measure the notes that it's being played on in hertz or whatever, because it's in between notes.
Yeah.
But somebody with perfect pitch was like, yeah, it just doesn't sound right across the room. And so you can't actually play along with the CD if you have a standard tuned guitar, because you'd have to down tune it somewhere in between, somewhere a little bit flatter because it's slowed down. So
which makes it
Radiohead
actually
apparently is notorious for that.
It makes it a tricky song to learn though, because it's easier to learn a song when you can play with it. But
Yes,
you can get fairly close, because I do actually know how to play that song. You can get fairly close just by letting your guitar get slightly out of tune, and it actually sounds better. So that was something I was always like, why does this sound worse when I tune it before I play this song? You know, so if you have a cheap guitar that goes out of tune a lot, it might serve you well for learning that song. But
well, and it's also a callback to technology when you would slow down the tape and it would change the pitch. Today you can slow something down without changing the pitch, because
that's right.
we live in magical
times.
times.
But then you lose the charm. That's part of the charm of it, you know. So, but yeah. So our family in the time in between these had gotten a satellite dish, because we lived out in the country, out in rural,
like one of the ginormous ones, or one of the mini dishes?
This was Dish Network. So this is when Dish Network was the thing. And the Dish Network offerings was not like a lot of things were like off brand, you know, like you wouldn't necessarily get you know, I think they were, because they were Canadian, we got like the Canadian version of a lot of things. So rather than MTV, we had Much Music. And so that was where I was experiencing a lot of these music videos. I know that's where I saw the Street Spirit video. And then when I saw the video for Just, and that song I was all in on too. And the video to this day is a top 3 all-time favorite music video of mine. It's so compelling, and I just, at that point, that was what made me go get the Bends. So I even remember I ordered it from Columbia House. That was a Columbia House CD that I got, and yeah, I just, from that moment on, like that was the moment. Like if there's a BC AD moment for me with Radiohead, it's Just, you know, before Just and after Just. After that, I've been all in along for the ride with Radiohead.
All right, I'm going to hit stop, and then I'm going to restart the podcast just because I had a black screen moment. It should be all fine in post-production here. Be right back. So the other interesting thing about the Bends is that it kind of it foretells what this band is going to become, and we don't know it when we're listening to the Bends, but a lot of the experimentation and some of the electronic feel that's going to show up in OK Computer is starting to reveal itself on the Bends. I don't think I had any expectations for Radiohead coming out of the Bends. I just loved the record and felt like this band had become a lot more important to me. But did you have any feel or vibe that this band could end up making something like OK Computer coming out of the Bends?
No, I don't think I definitely didn't have expectations that they were going to become yet what they became. But like I just remember like that opening gauntlet of the Bends, the Planet Telex, the Bends, High and Dry, Fake Plastic Trees is such a gauntlet of an opening that I just always felt like, okay, this is a really good band. And I was really excited for what they were going to do next. Like I was always very eager for a follow up to this. Uh, I There's just no way I could honestly say like, oh yeah, I expected what we got when OK Computer came out, because I really don't think anybody really was. But like, you know, just looking at even like I'm looking at this track list right now on the Bends, like there's just like there's not much of a lull at any point in this thing. Like it's really solid all the way
Black Star
through.
could have been a single.
Black Star should have been a single. That song is so good. Bulletproof is really cool. Like I said, Iron Lung and Just are awesome. And then you close it with Street Spirit. Like this is just an unbelievable album. And it was really cool because this was happening at the height. Well, maybe not the height, but like in the peak era of grunge that this happened, and it wasn't grunge. It was something different, but it was still so good that it just punched its way through, even here in America. And I can't speak to how popular they were in the UK at that time, but they certainly punched through here in America. And I was definitely in on this band, but yeah, to your point, I can't sit here and say like I was like, oh, okay, these guys are about to change rock music, because that I didn't see coming.
Yeah, I was bringing up some of the statistics and the accolades for the Bends. It was in 2000, it was named the second greatest album of all time, behind Revolver by the Beatles. I mean, that's just a fan vote, so let's not get crazy. But I just want people to understand how excited the world was about the Bends, even if they were overrating it or prisoners of the moment.
Yeah.
I was trying to find the sales numbers, because it sold by the end of '96. It had sold 2 million copies. It was certified platinum in the UK. Sales over 300,000, quadruple platinum by July 2013. So
wow.
And it's not the true record that exploded them into the universe, which is where we're going to go next.
There are, though, a lot of Radiohead fans our age who were there from the beginning who do prefer the Bends to OK Computer. Like I know some Radiohead fans who prefer the Bends. So it's not like it was a universal thing that like OK Computer is seen as better by everybody. But when you talk about becoming the zeitgeist and sort of just redefining, like in our era, I would say like if anything was remotely close to like the Beatles putting out an album in our lifetime in terms of rock music, like it was this era of Radiohead, from OK Computer, Kid A, and everything after. When Radiohead put out an album, the music world stopped. It was like, okay, everybody stop what you're doing. Radiohead has a new album. We need to listen to it and see what they're doing. And OK Computer is the album that turned them into that.
So fast forward to 1997. I'm a freshman in college, I think. But by the time OK Computer's really getting into my world, Paranoid Android comes out, and just, you want to talk about sending chills down your spine. The kind of song that has twists and turns and stops and starts and like movements like a classical piece of music. Just one of the most groundbreaking rock songs of our lifetime by a contemporary artist. You and I weren't really hanging out and listening to Queen when they released Bohemian Rhapsody, but this is like
Yeah,
on that level
for
in
sure.
terms of just nothing anybody'd ever done before.
When I was trying to learn guitar, this was probably like my maybe junior year of college, so this had been out for a while at that point. I bought a book like How to Write Songs, and I was reading this book, and they
For
were talking
dummies.
about, I mean, that's what it was. And I did not learn how to write songs. I'm not sure that's the best way to learn how to write a song, reading a book, How to Write Songs. But uh, anyways, the author was talking, like, introducing all these different elements of what makes a song great and blah, blah, blah. And I just remember that they actually cited Paranoid Android as the most perfect song ever written from a songwriter's perspective. And they talked about exactly what you were talking about, the way it is, it feels comfortable because, like, it is in a key, but it constantly subverts your expectations for that. And it has these different sections that are different from each other, but sort of build on each other so they feel connected. And he talked about in this, like, how hard that is to do with the song. Like, yeah, you could put a totally different part in a song, but, like, does it still feel like the same song? And that's really, really hard to do, is to have a section that is entirely different, but still feels like it's part of that song. And that's something that Paranoid Android does exceptionally well. And then it also has one of the, like, coolest guitar solos ever at the end. I don't know that, I'm not the person to judge what's the most technically proficient guitar solo of all time. I don't think this would probably fall into that category, but musically, it is just a blistering guitar solo that is just perfect for the way that song is building towards the end. So, I just have a huge appreciation for that song. And I think, like so many others, when I first heard that song, that was when it was like, okay, like, this band is they're on to something here. Like, these guys are cooking. And
So, I didn't even know this when I said all this, but the song was apparently inspired by songs like "Happiness Is a Warm Gun" by the Beatles, and also Bohemian Rhapsody and the Pixies.
yeah, I mean, that all makes perfect sense, right? Like, those are all, songs or bands that do that sort of thing. So so I think, like, that was certainly, like, the one that first drew me in. But then,
Do you think the label was kind of like shitting themselves when they wanted to make that the lead single?
It's kind of interesting because, like, I don't know that I could point to any one song and be like, this is, like, the perfect lead single. Like, I feel like probably Karma Police was probably, like,
It's always Karma Police.
the
Yeah,
biggest single from this.
that's the Black Hole Sun. Like, you and I, unless we really really think about it, if tragedy were to strike that band, Karma Police would be their Black Hole Sun.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so I probably, like, that's probably the one that the label probably could have pushed for. But I do think that if they had any sensibility to them, I think they probably would have understood, like, this song, Paranoid Android, is going to really hit people in the face. Like, it's going to get people to pay attention and be like, hey, something's going on with Radiohead. Like, they've done something here with this album. And then, like, for it to be, like, the second track on the album too, like, that, the way that, coming off of Airbag, which is an awesome song, awesome opening song. It's a great way to start an album. And then right into Paranoid Android, like, you're just off to the races with this album.
Well, let's So Airbag was never officially a single, but they
but it
released an
feels like
Airbag.
it.
They released an Airbag "How Am I Driving" EP, which I it must have been some leftover songs, but the um, by the time I saw the band on that tour or on the extended version of that tour, they were playing a lot of those songs like Polyethylene and Melatonin. Um, this band must have just been at a creative blitz where they couldn't stop writing perfect songs. And I'm sure that Airbag EP is full of a lot of those songs that kind of hit the cutting room floor but just didn't deserve to. Almost like the way the Smashing Pumpkins B-sides are like freaking good.
Yeah, like you listen to so many bands will put out their like 20-year anniversary editions or 10-year or whatever it is, and then they include all the demos and songs that were left behind on the cutting board. And you listen to it, you probably listen to most of them. You listen to them one time just out of curiosity to see if there's anything there, and then you never listen to them again. But the extended version of OK Computer, like you can listen to that anytime. Like it's that good. I sort of compare it to, again, here comes our Pearl Jam moment of the radio, but that, Pearl Jam put out Lost Dogs, like a 2-disc album of songs that are all, not all, but for the most part, pretty good songs that like you can actually just put that on and listen to it. But that extends over many albums. The fact that, the stuff Radiohead was leaving behind on this album, and then also Kid A, that like Amnesiac essentially comes out of the Kid A sessions. Like that's ridiculous that you can do that.
And I forgot to mention it during during the Ben's discussion, but one of my favorite Radiohead songs, and I wasn't trying to be really precious by saying that this was one of my favorite Radiohead songs, was from the extended single for maybe Planet Telex or something. It was called Maquiladora, and it's just this like perfect song. But Radiohead in these moments in this period, they were really they were catering to superfans. Like if you wanted to be a super fan of some other band like Tool, everybody had the same material, and there were no nuggets. If you were a big super fan of Smashing Pumpkins, like I said, there were nuggets for the super fans who wanted to buy the extra thing with the extra tracks that weren't on the main records. But not all bands did that.
Yeah. So I looked up here just to remember on the OK Not OK edition, the bonus disc. This track list is just insane. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, if you're not really into Radiohead, you won't know a lot of these songs. But like, I Promise, Man of War, Lift, Lull, Meeting in the Aisle, Melatonin, A Reminder, Polyethylene, Pearly, Palo Alto, and How I Made My Millions. Like, that is a ridiculous. That's an album. Like that,
and Polyethylene
that's
should have been a single.
an album. Yeah, like it's right there. And so I don't know what you want to call it, the zone that they were in for this run of albums that they made it's just unparalleled. Like it's just unbelievable the stretch that they were on.
And so OK Computer ends up selling nearly 8 million copies. I think they just got tired of releasing singles, and they just didn't care because the album was selling so much and everybody was listening to the entire thing. And this wasn't one of those records that was hitting the dollar bin where everybody bought it and then was trading it in. This wasn't Blues Traveler 4. This wasn't Hootie and the Blowfish Cracked Rear View. This thing was staying in people's collections even as it was selling just bananas number of copies. And then, we had it felt like they were on tour forever. We had a huge wait. Before we move on from OK Computer, is there anything else that I should be talking about before we move on? I mean, actually, I almost skipped past one of the most amazing things. So this was also the dawning of the MP3 era, and part of that, yes, people were stealing music, but also Radiohead was doing all these promotional things for OK Computer. They didn't they didn't come out of the bends as this band that didn't have to promote. OK
Right.
Computer turned them into the band that would never have to promote again. But there were
Right.
all these appearances on radio stations and in music stores with Tom York playing solo acoustic versions of these songs. And I had a collection of different versions of all these songs from the promo, like a solo acoustic version of Lucky. All and so as a collector in the MP3 world in those days, it felt like there were just so many cool opportunities to take to achieve more Radiohead.
Yeah. No, and to your point, like we talked about 7 television commercials and why like they made unbelievable music videos, but it ended after OK Computer. I don't recall. Maybe they did videos for Kid A, but I don't remember them if they did. I don't really have a notable Radiohead music video after OK Computer, and I think that's probably for a reason. But I will give one final shout out to the No Surprises video, though. Another all-time classic favorite video of mine, and it's so simple. Like this just goes to show you don't have to overthink these things. It was literally just Tom's head in a jar that was filling up with water as he was singing along, and then at some point it obviously covers him, and then he's just holding his breath, and then the water goes down, and that's the music video
in slow motion.
Yes, and it's just cool. Like it was, I don't know, there was just something about it that just drew you in. And so yeah, just give a special shout out to that too, and a good song.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so fast forward again. Now we're 3 years later. We're in the year 2000. From 97 to the year 2000, we had to wait, and they released Kid A. Was there even a single per se from Kid A? I'm trying to remember what I heard first. I mean, this is a record that I surely bought on the first day or two of its being released. So for me, it's just track one, everything in its right place.
I'm trying to remember if Idiotech or National Anthem were advanced singles. One of them might have been.
All right, here we go. In a departure from industry practice, Radiohead released no singles and conducted few interviews and photo shoots. Instead, they released short animations and became one of the first major acts to use the internet for promotion.
There we go. Okay.
Bootlegs of early performances were shared on file sharing services. I'm sure I was listening to those.
I felt like I had heard Idiotech before the album, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just, this stuff is all so long ago, but
and this was one of those records that leaked before it was officially out.
It did, and I was just going to mention that I remember getting the download, and my first time listening to it, I didn't necessarily care for it. It's funny, like some of my friends have given me a hard time for this because at the time I was just like, I probably even used harsh words to say like, "Oh, I hate this album. This sucks. Radiohead is over." I just was not prepared for the shift from guitar-focused music to electronic-focused music. I just was not prepared for it. And when you go from Paranoid Android and Karma Police to Optimistic and Idiotech and National Anthem, like these songs was just like, what is this? Like, this isn't the same band. But I will say, what kept me going, like kept bringing me back to giving it multiple tries, was everything in its right place. Like the intro to that song is just undeniable. That keyboard riff is just so equally like beautiful and mysterious at the same time. It's almost can be haunting to a degree. And that was what kind of made me keep going back and giving it a second chance, third chance, fourth chance. And then eventually it did sink in. And now to this day, Kid A is a unimpeachable top 5 all-time album for me. But it took a while for me to really gel with the direction they went with this. How about you? Were you in on first listen, or did it take you a while?
I found it to be really up and down. The first couple times I listened to it, it took me a while to really appreciate it as a complete work. I loved Everything in Its Right Place, and I loved Idiotech. And there was a time period where I probably skipped around a lot and listened to those, or I put those on mixes and kind of divorced them from the rest of the record. But over time, I really embraced that record as a full piece. And that's the way I think about it today. I never ever listen to Kid A when I'm just going to listen to one song.
Yeah,
I
right.
only listen to it completely from beginning to end anymore. And didn't you have a bit of a take about motion picture soundtrack?
Well, my take is that it is what prevents this from being a perfect album. It's like I wish so badly that Morning Bell was the last track on the album. Now, you could throw Tree Fingers in there too as like a bit of a bit of a throwaway. But like, yeah, I don't know. Like, to me, it's just not the way I wish that they would have ended this album. It's probably the thing that just slightly keeps it from being like in my discussion as a top 2 or 3 all-time favorite album. I was going to ask you though.
And by the way, I disagree with that. And when we talked about this before, I had said to you that when you go listen to the solo acoustic version of that, or even some covers of that, and that's a weird way to gain an appreciation for a studio version that you maybe don't love as much. But there's another song that's like that, where the studio version is not that great, and then you hear the artist do the solo version on piano, and then it gives you an appreciation for the more kind of complex studio version. And that's The Commander Sings Aloud. Do you know that song?
No.
The Commander Thinks Aloud by the Long Winters.
Okay.
And that the lead singer of the Long Winters is John Roderick, who ended up being Bean Dad on Twitter.
Okay.
And he got himself thrown off Twitter. But
there you go.
This song that is like, it's just okay on the record, but then it's become his signature song live, and it's just him and a piano, and it's absolutely unimpeachable. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's perfect. And then you go back and you listen to the other one, you're like, okay, yeah, I hear it now. And that's the way I think about motion picture soundtrack.
Well, sticking with Radiohead, like I sort of feel that way about True Love Waits, which we actually heard the live version first before the studio version. So that one happened kind of in reverse, but I was excited, seeing True Love Waits, that they were actually recording a studio version of it. And to me, it's just not as good as that, the live version.
I agree with you. I think I love motion picture soundtrack, but I actually think all the operatic or electronic orchestral flourishes make that song worse than it is when he just sings it with him and a guitar.
Yeah, man. And
I still think it's a phenomenal song.
To me, it's just not. I don't know. As an album closer, it's, for my taste, it's just not my favorite thing. But I was gonna ask you, do you remember? I don't know if was it Saturday Night Live that Radiohead did Idiotech on, or was it a late night show? I don't remember, but I remember it was my first time seeing them perform it, and there was some intrigue to me. I remember hearing this album and wondering, like, how are they going to play these live, and not really understanding what actually was happening, and seeing Johnny Greenwood not playing a guitar, but instead on the floor playing switchboard and moving wires around and stuff. And it was just like, whoa. Like, I just remember being like almost in shock of like how different that seemed from traditional
in the year
Radiohead.
2000, they played Idiotech and the national anthem, and you were watching Johnny, and I'm watching Tom York go into convulsions to sing the rhythmic parts on
Yeah.
stage, and just being absolutely enthralled by it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. He was like a man possessed performing those songs, and like the repetitive rhythmic vocalization parts, like definitely.
I mean, just imagine what kind of headspace you have to be in to write that, and then end up writing that thing as performed live.
Yeah,
It's a creative space that rock bands don't end up finding themselves in very often in the history of music. I don't think we've seen it a whole lot since then either, not even by Radiohead.
agreed.
It's just incredible.
Yeah. So I don't think I have a whole lot else, ironically enough, to say about Kid A. Because like for me, it's, and you touched on this a little bit. Like it's a hard album to be like, okay, like let me just listen to this one song. I mean, I can give the whole like optimistic the optimistic through Morning Bell run, if you want to pull that out as a section, is pretty unbelievable. But for the most part, like this is just, for me, I just view this as just one piece of music from beginning to end, and it's hard for me to really talk about it by like talk about individual parts of this song, because I just view this as a complete album.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like that this was Radiohead really feeling themselves. There wasn't a lot of fan service on here. It probably destroyed some of the more casual fans that they brought in with OK Computer. It's not quite like Vitology writing Not For You, but it's certainly, it's using all of the equity that it doesn't use all the equity, because that kind of indicates that maybe it's not good or not great, but it's not trying to be popular. It's not trying to be at the top of the charts. It's not trying to retain the fans that they created on OK Computer. It's a pure artistic play, and I think it works, but it definitely shrinks the audience, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely did. It's a magnifying glass. It's that taking a big ray of light and focusing it down to a pinpoint. That's exactly what it is. I do want to give a special shout out to, I mentioned I've only seen them once. That I talked a little bit about seeing them at Blossom. I don't remember what year that would have been, but I just remember, they, I want to say they did it in the encore, Everything in Its Right Place. But I just remember like when all of a sudden they started with just the beat to it, and then all of a sudden the keyboard part came in, and it was a moment that like you just feel like your knees lock in place, you like your hairs kind of stand on the end. It was like a feeling I can really only distinctly remember two other times, and that was Chris Cornell playing Seasons, and also Pearl Jam opening with Wash. Getting to see those two things, like two personal songs that mean a lot to me. And this was like right there with those moments where I literally like just froze, like, oh my gosh, they're actually playing this song. It was very cool.
August 8th, 2001, you were at Blossom Music Center. They closed their main set with Paranoid Android, Idiotech, and Everything in Its Right Place before they came out for their encores. And they played the two encores.
I don't think that's the right show, because In
Okay.
Rainbows wasn't out yet.
Oh, yeah, that's 2001. That's the Kid A Amnesiac tour.
Yeah, and I know that I'm pretty sure it was an In Rainbows tour that I saw them.
Okay, June 6, 2012.
That sounds more right to me.
So they close their main set with Idiotech. They do the first encore and they do the second encore and close with exit music for a film, and then Paranoid Android.
Yeah. Yep.
So there you go. Sorry. I was 11 years too early.
That's right. Like I was going along with it for a minute, and then as I was like thinking about it, I was like, well, there's just no way it was 2001. So,
man, I'm looking at the opening of that set list, and Bloom, 15 Step, Kid A, Weird Fishes, Staircase. I might be wrong.
I might be wrong. It was awesome, but
yeah.
But I mean, outside of that, like that's what I'm saying. It was all these songs that these kids were all like super into, and I'm like, play songs from the Bends,
play one for us.
Yeah.
There's an old Rolling Stone article I think that I read where it was Neil Young was out on tour and he was playing, and as Neil Young is wont to do, he was playing what he felt like playing, and somewhere in the middle of the set, somebody stood up in the back and goes, "Play a few for us." And I can never forget that line and that story. Anyway, and it does make me think about Radiohead some, because they stopped playing Creep. They stopped,
sure.
They really did, for a long period of their career, just kind of, play by their own rules. There was no such thing as a festival set for Radiohead.
Yeah.
They just kind of did what they did, and they had the equity to get away with it.
Yeah.
I keep using the word equity, but I really think about it like that. Like when you achieve a certain level of fandom, you've got an artistic equity, and how you use it is up to you. And there are bands like Pearl Jam that play the hits. There's bands like Tool that, no, we only play the new stuff, and we'll give you one old one at the end.
Yeah.
Everybody uses their equity differently.
Well, when you put out the Benz, OK Computer, and Kid A back to back to back, you've definitely built up equity. So
you're not that big on Amnesiac, huh?
Well, no, I am actually. Like I might like. It's weird for me to say, "Oh, Kid A is a top 5 all-time favorite album." I might listen to Amnesiac more than I do Kid A today, and I definitely don't like it more than Kid A, but like it's not a massive drop off as far as I'm concerned. So I really like it. But again, like it is an album of songs that were part of the Kid A sessions. That's where most of these songs came out of. But like, I mean, when we're talking about You and Whose Army, Knives Out, Dollars and Cents, like Spinning Plates, Life in a Glass House, like Pyramid Song, like these are unbelievable songs. So it's not, I'm not taking anything away from Amnesiac. It's just hard for me to put it on the same pedestal as the run that they had for those 3 that came before it.
Yeah, it's weird how one song can really impact the way you feel about a record, but Life in a Glass House continues to be one of the most important songs for me that radio ever put out. Just absolutely, if I'm doing a top 5 personal Radiohead songs, there's no way that Life in a Glass House doesn't make that list. And it happens to be on Amnesiac, and so all of a sudden, without that song, Amnesiac is probably lower on my rankings. Even though I do like it, I like the rest of it. But finishing that way with that song and the sound of the trumpet and the swing vibe and the slow time, it gives me chills every time I hear that song.
And Tom's delivery is just so spot on that song. Like we've talked about this in the past about how in many ways Tom often uses his voice as an instrument. And this is certainly a song where he does that.
Yeah. And there's one version of Life in a Glass House live on Jools Holland from 2001 that it's must watch for Radiohead fans, because it's not a song that I think they've played live maybe ever, other than that one TV appearance, and it's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Actually, it says right here on Reddit that that's the only time they've ever played it live.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So let's go. let's skip ahead, man.
Yeah.
I feel like we already kind of talked about Hail to the Thief a little bit.
I
But
think the
it was a weird record. It was obviously
it was overtly political,
overtly political,
which was different for Radiohead. I mean, for a band that has a song called Electioneering, like you might think it's like weird to say that, but this was really like in your face, and this was at a time when George Bush was a very divisive president across the global stage, not just in America. And we won't get into the politics of it. We'll steer clear of that. But just to say,
I think it's important because it kind of bugged me a little bit that the British band was weighing in on American politics. I'm like, do we really need to do this?
Yeah.
I mean, I support your right to do it, but is it smart?
I find it fascinating that as much as I would say George Bush was polarizing, like you could also say like, Donald Trump's presidency was polarizing, but like I think people have almost more of a negative opinion of the Trump presidency than they do Bush, but Bush inspired way more songs. I mean, I can just rattle off so many songs that were specifically written about George Bush, and I don't remember as many specific songs being written about Donald Trump in his presidency. And I think it's just kind of an interesting note, and it might speak to the difference in the way that these guys were divisive, and how the art of that time sort of reacted to that. But like, certainly like I remember, obviously Pearl Jam, Bush Leaguer, a direct song about Bush. You had there was that Linkin Park song where they talked about the presidents on TV stumbling and mumbling, like, what did he say? And like that, like there was a lot of things written about George Bush in the music sphere.
So two things. Number one, I just kind of felt like it was hack in the moment. It was like, oh, another one. Okay.
It was low hanging fruit. It was low hanging fruit for sure. It felt
like low hanging fruit. And number two, if you're going to write a political song or a protest song, it better be born in the USA. Like Bush Leaguer musically is just not a good song.
Right.
And so like it's got music above the music's got to be there. The songcraft has to be there. It has to be something that's really great if you truly want to make a statement. And so many people, so many bands went message over music, and I just felt like it was lazy writing. Just because you feel like you have something to say doesn't mean that a song is a good idea. You got to write a good song.
Yeah. It's just kind of interesting that became like a protest moment through music, and again in a way that I don't think we've really returned to since then, despite certainly like going through Obama, Trump, and Biden, like it's just kind of interesting that we haven't seen the music form really react much to now I can think of some songs written about different guys, and our guys at Pearl Jam never let us down. On Gigaton, they had a Trump reference in there, so they're always there. They're there for us with that. But
what it might be, Andrew, is that today artists don't have to write songs to trash the president. We'll save that for our Twitter. We'll write a couple of tweets, and then we'll go back to writing the songs we were going to write.
That's a good point. There's other outlets.
They have so many different channels that they're doing podcasts and interviews and all this kind of stuff.
That's a really great point. That really is. Like that's probably a large part of it.
Yeah. I don't know that we're that much worse off for it. I mean, obviously, if we don't get born in the USA, we're worse off musically.
But
in the world.
Again, to your point though, that seems to be more of the outlier than the norm. So
Hail to the Thief was kind of, I was also 24 going on 25 when this album was released, and I was talking about being a totally different place in life compared to when I first had Radiohead. I kind of felt like they were still making music for teenagers and young people, people who were up for more experimentation. I probably started to. There was a lull for me in my mid-20s where I didn't want to be challenged that much. I wanted more of the same.
Mm-hmm.
I've since come around, and I love to be challenged by new music again in my elder years, but I really did kind of go through a lull where I was like, I was questioning whether I needed more new music for a
Yeah.
little while. Did you ever go through a period like that?
Probably in the like late 2000s, probably a little bit. And I don't know if it was as much that I was specifically going through that, or if there just I wasn't finding new music as much. Like, I remember going through a phase where I just felt like I wasn't finding new music. So I don't know if that was a factor of the music that was being put out at that time, or if it was just where I was at in my life. But I don't know. But what's interesting about that is, and we kind of come full circle a little bit here, and I don't want to just like totally brush past all these like In Rainbows or post Hail to the Thief albums, but we did hit a point where my relationship with Radiohead just became like, they put out an album, I listened to it, I'm like, yeah, I like this. Here are the songs that I like more than the others. But I have not felt the same essential pull to these albums. Like in Rainbows, I really like a lot. Moonshaped Pool.
King of Limbs.
See, King of Limbs, like, that really didn't stick with me much at all.
I maybe listened to King of Limbs 4 or 5 times ever.
Yeah, and you know, for me, Moonshaped Pool,
which is a weird thing for me to say.
Yeah, but I'm with you. Like, it was the most electronic album that they put out. To me, it almost felt more like a Tom York solo album than a Radiohead album. And that's why I appreciated a Moonshaped Pool, because I did think it brought it back to feeling a little bit more like a Radiohead album. But even like that album was a lot of old songs that had been written previously. And these are some of these songs had been performed live. Like we talked about, True Love Waits was already on their live album. So we're sort of at a point where like Radiohead themselves feel a little bit in limbo. Like, I don't know. Do we even know, are Radiohead still a band? Like, you know, as
I mean,
Tom,
they're certainly on hiatus. They're doing the Smile.
Tom and Johnny
but to your point about
Smile.
Moonshaped Pool, it did feel like kind of the, all right, well, let's clear out the decks, let's cap the career. If this is it and we're done, then this is a fine way to end it. It's not a greatest hits record, but it's clearing the decks and giving the fans one last record, a bunch of songs that sound like songs. And honestly, I love the record. It's uneven. It's not perfect. I think it's a great. If that's the end of Radiohead, I think it's a great send off. To be honest.
Yeah, I have no complaints about that as being a farewell album for them. And I don't want them to do it for the wrong reasons. And I'm going to say something that I don't know that I would say Soundgarden did King Animal for the wrong reasons. But in hindsight now, I definitely do wish Down on the Upside was their last album. And so I don't want Radiohead to put out an album that, looking back, we're like, gosh, I kind of wish Moonshaped Pool was actually their last album, because it does work as a finale. But having said all that, I actually hope that they do put out another album. Like, I want more Radiohead music. I'd love to see what they would have in them today, but I truly just don't know where they're at as a band. And they didn't do much press when they were active. So certainly in this time where they've been on hiatus, or whatever you want to call it, you know, they've all had projects. Like, almost every member has done a solo album. You know, Johnny is extremely busy scoring soundtracks, working on the Smile with Tom. You know, even Ed O'Brien put out a solo album. Like, these guys are doing stuff. They're out there, they're active, but they are not really talking about Radiohead. And so that's we're kind of at a point where, and it almost seems fitting in the same way that Radiohead have always been a mystery, and the great mystery now is, are Radiohead still a band? And we just don't know yet.
I find a lot of the speculation into the personal lives of the band to be kind of gross, but at the same time, like, and so I don't want to try and conclude anything, but I will point out that shortly before Moonshaped Pool came out, Tom York separated from his wife, and about a year after it comes out, she passes away from cancer. They dedicate a reissue of OK Computer to her. Like, just to point out that, you know, we look at the records and we look at the output, but all of these are humans who are going through some shit that we don't know anything about. And maybe none of this has to do with anything, but it also has everything to do with everything, because these are humans who make the art. And so if it's no more Radiohead and they're going to do the Smile, like, cool. The Tom York and all the other musicians in Radiohead don't owe me a thing. They've given me more than my fair share of happiness and joy and beautiful music. And if, like, anything else I get from them feels like bonus, like, I'll just be thankful.
Yeah, they've never been a band to do things for the wrong reasons, and so it does make perfect sense that if whatever it is about the creative outlet of the Smile being the thing that's working for Tom right now, it kind of just makes sense that he might just want to focus on that, and they're just going to let Radiohead sit until, if it makes sense for them to go back to it, they will, and if it doesn't, this very well could be it. And you know, we'll just wait and see. I'll always, like, every now and then Google, like, Radiohead new album, you know, and just kind of see. And there's always, like, all these whispers out there that something might be cooking, or somebody will make a cryptic remark. So I don't think it's by any means dead, but I have not seen anything that makes me feel like anything new is imminent in the next couple years.
And there you have it. I think that's a perfect place for us to stop. I'm sure we didn't cover the waterfront as well as some Radiohead fans wanted us to, but you and I wanted to do the deep dive into Radiohead, and selfishly, you know what this is going to do is this is going to cause me to listen to Radiohead for the next week and a half.
Yep, exactly. So that's the best motivation.
So if nothing else, I hope it does that for you guys too.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for watching on YouTube. The best thing you can do to help us out is to tell a friend about the podcast, to hit subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on our podcast platform, go to albumofrecord.com, do all the things, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much.